We should all know that Okinawa, despite being a relatively smaller island of Japan, has had for the longest time the most concentration of US military forces anywhere in the world outside the US continent. We're talking dozens of military bases with tens of thousands of US troops, along with its weapons, political influence, and much more, all on this tiny island. But recently, as tensions have risen between the US and China, Okinawa has become more of a focus for the US and its ally Japan. Here's why. Welcome to the Global Network. Please support us by clicking the like button and subscribing to our social media accounts to stay up to date with our content. If you want to go further, consider joining our organization by visiting our website, spaceforpeace.org. In the November 2023 military exercise between US and Japan, or sometimes better described as a joint war game, revealed both the countries' policies leading to war. First, private airports and harbors have begun to be utilized by the SDF, which is Japan's self-defense forces. Second, over 30,000 service members from all SDF forces, including an additional 10,000 U.S. Pacific Fleet, Army, Air Force, and Marine forces participated, using over 3,500 vehicles, 20 war vessels, 210 aircraft, all being used in the joint land, air, sea, and amphibious operation exercises. Now, the touch and go exercises by the jet fighter pilots at private airports were used not only on the island of Okinawa, but also Tokushima Islands, Amami Island, Oita, and Okayama Island, which all surprised local residents in causing opposition movements. At the time, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced a year earlier to this exercise, back in December 2022, its Defense Build-Up Plan, which includes 43 trillion yen in its defense budget to be spent in the next 5 years. This plan alone would make Japan the third largest military spender in the world after the United States and China, respectively. We should recognize this change not as a build-up to defense, but by becoming the third largest military spender in an already extravagant global military budget, this is anything but defense. In addition, this is Japan's largest military build-up plan since World War II, and we all remember that war and its horrible consequences. Just a few months ago, in December 2024, the current cabinet of the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba approved a new record-high military budget for 2025. It is the 13th consecutive year that Japan has increased military spending, and is part of Japan's ongoing remilitarization as Tokyo, alongside the Pentagon, prepares to wage war against China and expand its involvement in the war against Russia.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has approved a record budget of 115.5 trillion yen. That's about $732 billion for the next fiscal year starting in April. That is on the back of growing social security and defense spending. About $55 billion will be set aside for defense, a 9.4% hike from this year.
Prime Minister Ishiba, a far right-wing hawk and former defense minister, became prime minister in October 2024. Like his predecessors, Fumio Kishida and Yoshihide Suga, he is continuing the militarization agenda that sharply was accelerated under Shinzo Abe throughout the 2010s. Now, Tokyo has all but thrown out the Peace Article 9 of the Constitution, which bans Japan from acquiring military weaponry and waging war overseas. But Tokyo is openly acquiring offensive weaponry that would be capable of striking targets in China, Russia, or even North Korea. This includes 940 billion yen, or about 5.9 billion USD, for developing long-range missiles, a satellite constellation, and the deployment of Tomahawk cruise missiles. Tokyo signed a deal recently to purchase 400 Tomahawks from the United States last January. In addition, 1.8 billion yen, or about 11.4 USD million, will be spent on equipment to launch Tomahawk missiles from Japan's Aegis naval destroyers. Another 533 billion yen, or 3.4 billion USD, will be spent on missile interceptors and mobile reconnaissance radars in Okinawa, which hosts approximately half of the 54,000 US troops stationed in Japan. The purpose is to prepare the region for a US-instigated war with China over Taiwan, a conflict which Tokyo plans to take an active role. The Okinawa Prefecture, or the Ryukyu or Nansei Islands, have been increasingly militarized over the last several years with the deployment of missile batteries and military units. From these islands, Japan would funnel weapons into Taiwan as the US bogs China down in a war similar to the strategy employed against Russia in Ukraine. However, a war would undoubtedly expand to the Chinese mainland and throughout the Indo-Pacific as the US and China attempt to carve up China in pursuit of its imperialist interests. To pay for its militarist agenda, the Japanese government plans to impose a 4% surtax on corporate taxes, an increase big business will have no trouble avoiding through tax loopholes. The government will also increase taxes on heated tobacco products and cigarettes, and also intends to raise income taxes by at least 1%. But a final agreement on this last point hasn't been reached yet. The burden for this record high military spending falls on, always, the Japanese working class and poor as economic conditions decline. In October, the International Monetary Fund estimated that the country grew by just 0.3% for 2024. 0.3%. And by 2025 will only grow 1.1%. Real wages have fallen nearly every month for the past 2.5 years, including a 0.4% drop in October.